1705. The thrones of Europe trembled. In the Americas, the first embers of war were already alight. Spain and Great Britain had stood together to crush the ambitions of France. And so, when a British emissary arrived in Madrid, he was welcomed with open gates. With ceremony, he entered the royal palace, and with trust, he was led before the throne of King Charles.
As we speak, 10,000 of His Royal Majesty's soldiers lay siege to Savannah. Thousands more are marching into the Kentucky and Louisiana territories. His Majesty demands the surrender of all Spanish colonial holdings. What say you?
Surrender lands hard fought by my brave conquistadors? Never. Let the men of Albion come. Let them test or resolve.
By order of His Britannic Majesty King William, this is a formal declaration of war.
10,000 marched under the British and colonial banners. Redcoats, dragoons, colonial levies, the storm of steel and smoke. Against them stood barely half their number. Farmers, militia, a few regulars, and a will forged in desperation. The first shots ring out. Local horsemen, loyal to the Spanish crown, skirmish with British dragoons. The battle begins. Not just for Georgia, but for the New World. The lines meet in a clash that shakes the world. Through a haze of fire, smoke and steel, the world looks on in awe as the most powerful nations in history meet on the field. Where lesser men might falter, Spanish cavalry met the enemy head-on. Their sabres found purchase in the chaos, their horses never turned. Again and again the red tide crashed upon the Spanish line. Again and again it was repelled. By midday the fields were thick with corpses. Gunpowder blackened the faces of both King's men. Units dissolved into clouds of smoke and steel. The British right folded. Their centre, bloodied and exhausted, faltered under relentless fire. Another assault turned rout. Where once stood ranks, now lay ruin. Tattered flags, broken bayonets, and men who would never return to London, Boston, or Charleston. seeing Enrique de Leon arriving with fresh troops forces the British to start withdrawing from the field. Cannons from both sides unleash a relentless barrage. It's not until the British commander requests a ceasefire do the cannons stop. For the first time in hours, there is relative peace. When the guns fell silent, thousands of British, Colonial and Spanish soldiers lay dead. Entire regiments had vanished beneath the Georgian soil. Spanish losses were heavy, but the line held, and in that holding, history was made. What began as conquest ended in catastrophe. For Britain, Georgia would not be remembered for victory, but for resistance carved